I saw a UFO and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left and then down the river. It wasn't a helicopter, it wasn't a balloon, and it was so near, silent, and it looked dark, like black or grey in the middle, and had white lights, just looked like light bulbs, you know, just going off, on, blink, 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 round the bottom, and on top was a red light.
I think what the UFO phenomenon is teaching us is that we don't understand time and space. Here are objects, I think we have to call them objects, that are physical, that interact with the environment, that cause effects on the witnesses, on the psychology and the physiology of the witnesses, and leave traces on the ground, and yet are capable of, appear to be capable of manipulating time and space in ways that go beyond what our physics understands today.
If the myth of the rebellion and fall of Lucifer is considered in the context of the spiritual history of Shadanakar, it loses its meaning. There have never been any events in the meta-history of our planet that could be reflected in the events of this myth. Once, a long time ago, something else happened, memories of which, although very distorted, have been preserved in some other myths, such as the tale of the rebellion of the Titans. As for the legends related to the uprising and fall of Lucifer, these events once took place on a universal scale, in dimensions that exceed all categories of our understanding, within the Macrobrahmatoras that encompasses the universe. What happened was translated by the spirit seers of antiquity into the realm of epochal human concepts, and took shape in this myth. The epochal concepts have died out, and the scope of our perceptions has expanded immeasurably. Now, if we want to grasp the immortal and true seed of the idea in this myth, we must disregard all that is epochal that has been incorporated into it, and focus solely on the central fact it asserts. Naturally, the consciousness of even the wisest in those times was so far removed from the current understanding of the dimensions and structure of the universe that the universal knowledge, which seeped into their consciousness thanks to the efforts of their heart's unseen friends, was compressed and confined within the narrow volume of their empirical experience and their strong, but not enriched or refined minds. Nevertheless, the task of those who now try to express in human concepts and words even an echo of the universal mystery of the so-called Morning Star's rebellion is hardly easier. Such an attempt would consist of two stages. First, finding in the ocean of our concepts those that are closest to reflecting this transcendent reality. Second, finding in the ocean of our language those phrases that can, in turn, somewhat reflect these elusive concepts. However, this work is tied to the organic growth of a person's personality and their universal experience. It cannot be rushed by mere whim. In the unfathomable depths of time, a spirit, one of the greatest, whom we call Lucifer or the Morning Star, expressing the inherent freedom of choice that every monad possesses, rebelled against his creator to create another universe according to his own design. Many other monads, both great and small, joined him. Their creation of another universe began within this one. They tried to create worlds, but these worlds proved unstable and collapsed because, by rebelling, the apostate monads had rejected love, the only unifying and cementing principle. The universal plan of providence leads many monads towards supreme unity. As they ascend the steps of existence, their forms of union are perfected, and their love for God and for each other brings them increasingly closer. And when each of them immerses itself in the Son of the world and co-creates with him, the most perfect unity is achieved, a merger with God without losing their unique self. Lucifer's cosmic design is the opposite. Each monad that joins him is only a temporary ally and a potential victim. Each demonic monad, from the greatest to the smallest, harbors a dream to become the ruler of the universe. Pride convinces it that it is potentially stronger than all others. It is guided by a sort of categorical imperative, somewhat expressed by the formula: there is the I, and there is the not I. All that is not I must become me. In other words, everything and everyone must be absorbed by the singular, absolutely self-affirming I. God gives of himself. The anti-divine principle strives to absorb everything. This is why it is primarily a vampire and tyrant. And while the tyrannical tendency is not only inherent in any demonic self, but is an integral part of it. Therefore, demonic monads temporarily unite with each other, but essentially they are rivals not for life, but unto death. Once a group seizes local power, this contradiction soon emerges, mutual strife begins, and the strongest prevails. The tragedy for demons in the cosmic struggle is further compounded by the fact that the Lord continues to create new monads, while demons are incapable of creating even one. Consequently, the balance of power continuously shifts not in their favor. There are absolute guarantees that no new defections will occur, and none will ever happen again. In any case, all demonic monads are of very ancient origin. They are all long-standing participants in the Great Rebellion. It is true that later on, and even now, there are no defections, but rather something that appears similar, a highly conscious being, sometimes even an entire group, temporarily opposes the providential will. However, this rebellious choice is not made by the monad itself, but by the lower self, the soul, with its limited consciousness. Therefore, this rebellious activity takes place not in the spiritual world, but in the material worlds, which are subject, by the will of the demons themselves, to the law of retribution. Thus, the rebellion is doomed from the start, and those who commit it embark on a long path of redemption. Gradually, through the course of their struggles, the demonic forces began to realize the futility of their attempts to create their own universe. While they continued to create individual worlds and exerted tremendous efforts to stabilize their existence, they also set another goal for themselves: to seize control of worlds that already exist or are currently being created by providential forces. Their goal is not the destruction of worlds, but rather their conquest. However, the destruction of these worlds is the objective consequence of such domination. Devoid of the unifying principles of love and co-creation, and held together only by the contradictory principle of violence, worlds cannot exist for any substantial length of time. There are disintegrating galaxies. There are dead and dying planets: Mars, Mercury, Pluto, ruins of Brahmaphuras. All monads of light have been expelled from these systems that have fallen under demonic dominion. Following this, a final catastrophe ensued, and the demonic hordes found themselves aimlessly roaming through cosmic space in search of a new target for invasion. Among the millions of galaxies in the universe, there are many such worlds, but unfortunately, our galaxy is not one of them. Long cast down from the macro Brahmaphutra of the universe, the forces of the rebellion in the worlds of our galaxy wage an unceasing, tireless battle against the forces of light, taking on millions of forms, and Sharanakar has become one of the arenas of this struggle. Sharanakar became such an arena in those remote times when on Inroth Earth was a semi-molten sphere, and other layers of Sharanakar, then counted in single digits, were just being created by the great hierarchies of macro Brahmaphuras. In those realms, known today collectively as the abode of angels, there was no law of mutual devouring. Instead, the principle of love and friendship reigned supreme. There was no law of death. Each being transitioned from one layer to another through material transformation, free from suffering and not precluding the possibility of return. In these worlds, which then possessed only 3 dimensions of space and were therefore almost as dense as Enroth, there was also no law of retribution. Mistakes were rectified with the help of higher powers. Glimmers of memory about this, rising from the treasure troves of deep memory into the consciousness of ancient sages, yet diminished and simplified by their understanding, led to the crystallization of the legend of the lost paradise. In reality, it was not a paradise, but a beautiful dawn that shone not over the earthly Enroth, which was then still devoid of organic life, but over a world now called Olirna. This dawn has been preserved in the memory of those few human monads, who did not come to Shadanakar later, like most, but began their journey there in times more ancient than antiquity, not in Enroth, but in the angelic Olirna. This fellowship of proto-angels could be called, in a certain sense, the first humanity of Shadanakar. A great demon, one of Lucifer's lieutenants, invaded Shadanakar with hordes of lesser demons. His name is Gaktunga. It was a prolonged and stubborn battle. It culminated in his partial victory. He failed to expel the forces of light from the Brahmfatura, but he succeeded in creating several demonic layers and transforming them into impregnable citadels. He managed to interfere in the process of the emergence and development of life on earthly Enroth, and left his mark on the animal kingdom. The planetary laws, through which the forces of light began to create organic life on Enroth, became unrecognizably distorted. It is false and blasphemous to attribute the laws of mutual devouring, retribution, and death to the divine. God is light, and in him there is no darkness. From God comes only salvation. From him only joy. From him only grace. And if the laws of the world strike us with their cruelty, it is because the voice of God in our souls rises against the creations of the great tormentor. The mutual struggle of demonic monads, the victory of the strongest rather than the most righteous, and the casting of the defeated into the abyss of torment, this law of Luciferian forces is reflected in the face of the organic world of Enroth, manifesting here as the law of survival of the fittest. Every suffering of a being, every pain and torment it endures, emits radiation, both here in Enroth and there in the worlds beyond death. Every emotion, every disturbance of its soulful nature, inevitably produces corresponding radiation. Emissions of malice, hatred, greed, and lust from animals and humans penetrate the demonic layers, replenishing the life forces of various classes and groups of their inhabitants. However, these emissions are barely sufficient to replenish the waning strength of individual demonic communities. But the radiation of suffering and pain, called Gavach, is capable of nourishing massive crowds of demons of almost all kinds and ranks. Essentially, Gavach is their sustenance. By imposing his grasp on the laws of Shadanakar, Gaktungur distorted them in such a way as to generate and multiply suffering. He made them burdensome, cruel, unbearable. He obstructed the establishment of the law of transformation in Enroth. As a resultant of both contending principles, death arose and became law. He impeded the principle of universal friendship. As a resultant of both forces, mutual devouring emerged and became the law of life. Finally, demonic forces intervened in the lives of other layers of Shadanakar, those through which passed the beings that had once incarnated on earthly Enroth. These layers were transformed into worlds of retribution, where tormentors reign, inflicting suffering upon the sufferers. Among the various types of Gavach, the one associated with the shedding of physical blood is of particular importance. When the blood of humans and animals flows from the body, it emits a searing radiation of exceptional intensity in the initial moments of this process. No bloodshed in history has occurred or occurs without the unconscious instigation of these otherworldly bloodsuckers. And the bloody sacrifices in some ancient cults were horrifying not only in their cruelty, but also because they fed not on gods, of course, but precisely on these demons. To replenish the forces of light, the planetary Logos, the first and greatest monad of Shadanakar, created a new layer and laid the foundation for a new humanity. Enroth was left to the animal kingdom. The new layer, however, was inhabited by Titans, resembling us in appearance, but gigantic and magnificent. In a world resembling Enroth, albeit still dim, their luminous figures moved against the backdrop of a blue-gray leaden sky across the slopes and curves of desert mountains, perfecting them. The Titan humanity numbered only a few thousand. They were devoid of gender, and the birth of new ones was not connected to the union of two elders in any way. But Gaktunga managed to incite their rebellion against Providence. Their idea was that they were the seed and nucleus of a new world order, a third one, opposed to both God and the demons. They thirsted for absolute freedom of themselves, but abhorred the cruelty and malice of the demons. The rebellion ended with Gaktunga's forces, using the law of retribution, dragging the souls of the Titans into deep torments. There, their torture lasted for over 1,000,000 years, until, with the help of providential forces, they managed to break free from captivity. Nowadays, most of them walk among humanity, standing out against the backdrop of their personality's magnitude and a peculiarly somber, though by no means dark hue. Their creativity is marked by a vague memory of their rebellion against divinity, as if scorched by ancient fire, and it impresses with its power. Their spirits are distinguished from demonic monads by their yearning for light, disdain for the base, and thirst for divine love. In the last millennia before Christ, the power of Gaktunga was so great that in the realms beyond, within many cultures of humanity, retribution lost its temporary nature. The exit from torment was firmly closed for the tormented, and hope was taken away from them. This law of retribution, the iron law of moral causes and consequences, those consequences that can manifest in current life, but fully reveal themselves in the afterlife, and even in subsequent incarnations, can be termed by the Indian term karma. Karma is as much a consequence of two opposing wills as the law of death and the law of struggle for existence. If demonic forces did not encounter constant obstacles from their enemies, the laws would be even more severe, because the demonic purpose of the laws is to generate gavaf and paralyze the manifestations of fallen souls of light. Laws also have another side, their purifying value. This is a remnant of the ancient, luminous pre-laws that once pacified beautiful hierarchies. The goal of these hierarchies and all the luminous forces of Shadanakar is to soften and enlighten the laws. The goal of the demonic forces is to make them even more burdensome. The plan of Providence is the salvation of all victims. The plan of Gaktunga is to turn everyone into victims. The divine humanity of the next world period will be a voluntary union of all in love. Devil humanity, apparently, it will not be avoided at the end of the current period, will be the absolute tyranny of one. The cosmos is the arena of evolving monads. The anti-cosmos is the universal alliance of adversaries, and the gathering of impaired luminous monads captured by them in the worlds ruled by demons. These captives have been deprived of their most sacred attribute, freedom of choice. Gaktunga is not daunted by the incompatibility of his scale to that of Lucifer in the universe. Like all demonic monads, he sees his smallness merely as a stage. Blind faith in his boundless growth and inevitable victory is inherent to his self. so believes in its future macrogalactic triumph any of these monads, no matter how miniature it may be at present, and whatever subordinate position it may occupy in the hierarchy of the rebellious. Therefore, each of them, including Gaktungur, is a tyrant not only in theory, and not only at the moment, but at every stage to the extent permitted by the power attained at that stage. Tyranny elicits such copious emanation of Gavach as no other principle of governance does. Absorbing Gavach enhances the demonic power reserve. If a demon were to replenish the loss of its strength by absorbing other psychic emanations, joy, love, selflessness, religious reverence, ecstasy, happiness, it would transform its nature. It would cease to be a demon. But this is precisely what it does not want. And only through tyranny alone, can it subdue the centrifugal forces within the demonic multitudes subject to it. And for the same reason, acts of defection and subsequent rebellions by individual demonic monads against Gaktunga sometimes occur in meta-history, and by reflection, in history. Such uprisings cannot be supported by the forces of light, because each of these monads has the potential to become a planetary demon just like him. If one were to become stronger than Gaktunga, it would become an even greater tormentor than he is. However, it should not be forgotten that cases of rebellion by individual demonic monads, not specifically against Gaktunga, but against the demonic world order in general, are not so rare. Such uprisings are nothing less than a turn of demonic monads towards the light, and it is clear that they then receive all-round assistance from providential forces. Despite all the satanic wisdom in Gaktunga's world schemes, these plans are unstable precisely because of the reasons mentioned, as the chances of controlling all the demonic monads in the world, and in the future even Lucifer himself, are vanishingly small for a planetary demon. But an insatiable drive for universal dominance is the source of the only joys understandable to him. He experiences such joys every time the slightest partial victory seems to him a step closer to the ultimate goal. These victories consist in the enslavement of other monads or their souls, demonic ones as half-allies, half-slaves, and the bright ones as prisoners and objects of torment. As far as Gaktungur can envision the cosmic future, he imagines himself as a sort of sun, around which countless monads rotate in concentric circles, each falling into him and being absorbed. Gradually, the entire universe enters this state of rotation around him, world after world plunging into a monstrously swollen hypermonad. The demonic mind is incapable of imagining anything beyond this. The lesser of these monads cannot even conceive of such an apotheosis. Firmly believing in their ultimate victory over the universe, they focus their will and thought on nearer, more easily imaginable stages.